Thank you.
Ndindi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this chance to contribute to this very important motion. Honorable Speaker, on the onset, first of all, I want to dissuade the argument that you always have that other countries like Japan and the US has a higher percentage of debt to GDP ratio. It is misplaced, Honorable Speaker, because when we talk about debt, what is reported is what is called gross debt. But there are countries that are both lenders and borrowers. For example, when you bring an argument about Japan having over 200% debt to GDP ratio, Honorable Speaker, the consideration must be that Japan is actually the #1 lender of the US economy. And therefore, when you net off all that, then the arithmetic stage. Honorable Speaker, the second thing is the cost. In some years, Japan actually had from 2010 up to 2020, in some years, Japan 10-year bond was actually attracting negative interest rate, Honorable Speaker, that they were borrowing at below zero. And Honorable Speaker, also, that discounts the fact that we cannot compare economies which are not homogeneous, Honorable Speaker, when we meet, we need to make a point. The other thing, Honorable Speaker, now going to the issue, is that I commend the committee and the recommendations. I have listened to the chair in terms of the recommendations of the committee, and I wish the government was actually listening to some of the recommendations made by the reports of this House, because a lot could have been arrested. Honorable Speaker, painting a picture on where we are, President Kibaki took our economy when our national debt, public debt, was around 1.2 trillion Kenya shillings. But actually 600 billion Kenya shillings, sorry. By the time he left, it was around 1.7 to 1.8 trillion Kenya shillings. Meaning the entire 10-year tenure of President Mwai Kibaki, our country borrowed a net of 1.2 trillion Kenya shillings with all that we saw in terms of economic development. President Uhuru Kenyatta, Honorable Speaker, of course with the Deputy President, who is the current President, took the debt from the then 1.7 trillion, Honorable Speaker, to around 8.7 trillion in 10 years, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, now this administration, in the 3 years and some months that has been there, the debt has grown from 8.7 trillion Kenya shillings to over 12.5 trillion Kenya shillings. Meaning we are borrowing over 1.2 trillion Kenya shillings per annum, Honorable Speaker, on the regular book. There are other loans that we already borrowed outside of the main book. It means, therefore, Honorable Speaker, that Kenya currently is borrowing over 4 billion Kenya shillings every single day. That we are here on a Thursday, Honorable Speaker, by the close of this Thursday, Kenya will have borrowed approximately 4 billion Kenya shillings every single day. And Honorable Speaker, this money is not part of what we see with our eyes, what is growth. Everything that is happening in the road sector is not part of this loan. It is another odious loan called securitization. Everything happening in the construction of stadiums is actually not part of the 4 billion we are borrowing every day. It is another odious debt called Talanta Board, or Honorable Speaker, the board that was listed recently. Honorable Speaker, anything that is happening in the bombers of Kenya is also not part of the 4 billion Kenya shillings Kenya is borrowing every day. That is another odious debt, Honorable Speaker, where we have given up our tourism fund, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the current debt levels in Kenya, I can dare say facing the cameras, that we are now a Ponzi scheme. And to prove the point, I would challenge the National Treasury to go only 2 months without raising money domestically. We will not be able to even pay the salaries, Honorable Speaker. And this report has actually betrayed the many narratives we hear in political gatherings, where we are told by people wearing suits and ties, oh, we have stabilized the economy. But this report, Honorable Speaker, has torn all those lies bare, that in terms of debt, Kenya is in red. The second thing, Honorable Speaker, I want to highlight that in the debt management strategy that we have, that we want to borrow as a country 78% domestically and only 22% outside. What is this, Honorable Speaker? This is basically crowding out money that should go into the private sector. But this is the major point, Honorable Speaker. Kenyans need to know the reason why we are heavily borrowing domestically other than foreign. It is because of one reason, Honorable Speaker. We are running away from accountability and responsibility. IMF led Kenya at around 3% on concessional borrowing. Why would you, in a sane mind, leave money on 3% interest rate and go and borrow money on double digit, Honorable Speaker? How can that happen logically?
Give him being actually given a minute each, so see how you can do, how much you can do. But just for the interest of the chair, you said that Japan is borrowing from Japan.
I can make the
point. Japan is borrowing from itself. That's why it's got a 240 something. Where does it borrow from?
If you possibly add me 3 minutes so that I clarify that also.
No, I'll give you more time, but just for the interest of the chair.
This is the
reason why Japan, the debt of Japan, the government of Japan's debt is not as dangerous as ours. It's because it's not borrowing from outside. Domestic borrowing. And at the same time, you find fault also with the domestic borrowing in here. Because they say external borrowing would have been cheaper. Even for Japan, how would it be? Can you maybe elaborate on this for the interest of the academic interest of the chair?
Let me start here, Honorable Chair. Japan GDP has not grown in real terms for the last 30 years. Let me start there. That dissuades the argument about heavily relying on debt. The Japan GDP has remained around 4.9 trillion US dollars since 1994, Honorable Speaker, in real terms. Second thing, what gets reported when we talk about debt to GDP ratio is gross debt. It does not account for the fact that you have borrowed, but you have also lent. Japan's case is this, Honorable Speaker. Japan, when we report the debt to GDP ratio over 200%, it has not accounted for the fact that Japan is the number one lender to the US, Honorable Speaker. Japan is also a lender to Kenya. That is not discounted. When you discount that, the debt to GDP ratio climbs down drastically, Honorable Speaker. That's the point. But the other issue of domestic and foreign. Honorable Speaker, Japanese debt relies, yes, domestically in terms of resource mobilization. But you look at the cost. Japan can actually afford to borrow domestically at 0.5% and lend to another country at 3%. They will be in business, Honorable Speaker, because their money is cheaper that is coming in than the money that is going out, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, the issue about comparing Kenya and Japan and the US, when we need to make a political point, is totally out of place. Can I now go to my 1 minute?
Except the fact that you're saying the US borrows from Japan heavily, but the GDP to the, what do you call
GDP, debt to GDP ratio.
Debt to GDP ratio in the US is over 100% of the US economy. Over 100% of the GDP. But then it does not borrow. I'm trying to look for a line that, you can, get the dots,
Okay.
Connect the dots. On the one hand, in Japan, they borrow domestically and lend externally.
Yes.
And lend to the US. So the US essentially should be in a predicament like ours. Actually worse, because they're over 120% GDP to debt ratio. But maybe just educate us on that.
Honorable Speaker, and I'm saying it very respectfully.
Yes.
I'll need an hour only to deal with that alone. Let me start here. When you are dealing with a country.
All right, we have 1 minute, and then we will 1 minute for the benefit, because the chair really wanted you to elaborate.
Can I clarify, then I go to the 1 minute?
1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute.
For this alone or for my 1 minute?
1 minute.
Okay. Honorable Speaker, the point I was making in terms of domestic borrowing, going back there, we come here and tell Kenyans we are borrowing domestically. But we are borrowing 78% domestically on one account, that we are leaving 3% interest rate money to come to a 10% money, Honorable Speaker. It's for one reason. We don't want accountability that comes with external money. External money, they will require you to do several things. One, you propose to form an infrastructure fund. Infrastructure fund in Kenya should actually be an illegal borrowing fund because you are forming it to leverage more and to borrow more. External money will tell you, we give you cheaper money, but account this as part of the national debt. But because the government does not want that accountability, then they come and borrow domestically, Honorable Speaker. External money like IMF, World Bank, and the other multilaterals, they will tell you a securitization and Talanta board must be part of the national debt. But Honorable Speaker, because we do not want that accountability, then we come domestically. Then what do we do domestically? We come and float boats. But who are the buyers? Number one buyer of the boat is NSSF. The number two, Honorable Speaker, is superannuation fund. And therefore, basically, part of this money is actually government borrowing money, its own money, Honorable Speaker. It's actually borrowing money that is meant for workers, Honorable Speaker, because phone calls can be made and NSSF can, in a manner that is not optimal, then channel resources there, Honorable Speaker. We need to know, Honorable Speaker, that the tendency we are on cannot perpetuate forever. We will soon be like Senegal and later on like Ghana. But I hope the decision makers can realize that the stability of our economy is more important than the current.
What's your point of order, Honorable? Although you are, the Honorable Ndindi Nyoro has, what's your point of order?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, Ndindi is my good friend. But I also wanted to tell him the point we are driving home is prudent use of the money we borrow. And actually, if we talk of Japan, the money they borrow is locally borrowed. You should actually compare a country like Morocco. Morocco, the debt ratio to the GDP is 70%, which is at the same level with Kenya. But you see, Morocco is doing better than Kenya by far. Not export alone. So we also need to be honest to ourselves so that we don't just talk, criticizing everything, but being positive criticism. And that is what I was trying to tell my brother, Ndindi.
What's your point of order, the Honorable Dr. Wilberforce Oundo?
Honorable Speaker, with deference to the young...
No, you can't have a point of order. Order, Wilberforce. You cannot have a point of order on a point of order. Okay, Onchoki. Charles Onchoki.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity so that I can make a contribution to this motion. I wish to...
The chair will make a ruling on a point of order, not you counter-arguing it. Proceed.
I wish to commend the committee for